Hello and welcome to today's presentation brought to you by ReadTech. Today's topic is an interesting readout of a research project conducted by our product development staff. They will present their findings on the topic of medical device recall prediction analytics. Today's presenters are Rachel Benway, who's a product manager here at ReadTech, and she leads the continuing development of our research and analytics solution, Navigator for medical devices. Rachel's going to take us through the agenda and the core research slides. And adding some color or commentary is our own Gary Sainer, Senior Manager of Information Solutions at ReadTech. Gary's a subject matter expert on UDI and other structured content reporting that is submitted to regulatory agencies and commercial organizations. A couple of logistical notes. Within the presentation, a few pop-up polls will be launched, and we do thank you in advance for participating in the polls. We really value your opinions. We'll take any questions that you might have at the end, so do submit them at any time in the questions panel. If we run out of time during the Q&A, we'll get back to you in the next couple of business days. Note that we are recording today's presentation, and a link to view the recording and the slides will be emailed likely within the next few business days. I'm Angela Alexandro, Life Sciences Marketing Manager at ReadTech. And I'm going to turn the slides over to Rachel, who will take us through medical device recall prediction analytics.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to share with you the results of a many months-long research project we have been working on here at ReadTech. The project has mostly focused around the data contained within our ReadTech Navigator for medical devices product. We've analyzed medical device data across all disciplines and have developed an algorithm that predicts product recalls that can be aggregated at the company level. This model currently has a balanced accuracy of approximately 81.4%. And using this model, it has found over 15,000 medical device products that are at risk of recall in 2020. Before we get started, I'd like to find out a little bit more about who we have in the audience today. Angela, can you please open up the first poll?
Yep, launching that poll now. So if you wouldn't mind, let us know about your role within your organization. Please select one. Are you in regulatory affairs, quality assurance, risk management, product development, or consulting or some other type of role? Thanks so much for clicking in. We've got the responses coming in now, and we'll give it a second or two. Okay, so let's take a look at those results. So interestingly, 31% of you are in regulatory affairs, 38% in quality assurance, and then 21% are in consulting or an other type of role. Thank you for participating in the poll.
Great. So here's our agenda for today's webinar. I'll start with the overview of our database and how we used it to form our initial hypothesis, then go into the basics of our methodology, results from some of our trials, and what we see as the leading indicators of a medical device recall. We will end with which devices may be at risk of recall in 2020 and how looking at these indicators could help your business.
Rachel, this looks very interesting. To get the discussion started, could you please describe the data that was used in your research? For example, where did it come from? What time period does it represent? Any cleansing or enrichment that ReadTech did to the data to build the relationships and improve quality? How would it be updated over the course of time?
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, we're going to get into all of that. As part of our Navigator for Medical Devices product, we built and maintain an extensive database of medical device companies and products. We start with identifying all the medical device companies by looking at the FDA establishment registrations and owner-operators, along with the FDA approval and clearance applicants, as these are primary sources. We then use the proprietary LexisNexis corporate affiliations database to help identify ultimate parents, subsidiaries, and generally how companies relate to each other. Then we evaluate all the pre-market approvals and humanitarian device exemptions for Class 3 products, and 510K clearances, along with de novos and the good ID listings for the Class 2 products. This should give us the universe of Class 2 and 3 medical devices, as long as the manufacturer is following the FDA-mandated regulations. Finally, we attempt to match each event to the appropriate products and companies These events include FDA device listings, adverse event reports from the MAUDE database, FDA recalls, warning letters, and more.
Rachel, many databases exhibit quality issues, such as the same company may be represented with numerous or slightly different names, or even be acquired by another company. Quality issues are also caused by missing or inaccurate identifiers in the product and event records. Now, with the FDA's implementation of UDI and marketing approval in listing databases and the growing presence of UDI in device labels in the actual marketplace, I believe the accuracy of product identification will eventually improve. But in the meantime, Rachel, what tools and techniques did you use to cleanse the data and match records across the company, product, and event domains?
Cleansing is definitely a priority for us. It also can be difficult with the data. The FDA data, some of it is submitted by the public, so it's not always the cleanest. But we do try to gather each individual entry for companies and products. We gather all the company aliases. Some companies even have aliases like formerly known as and doing business as, and we try to store each of those. And then use the corporate affiliations to try to create those official linkages between the companies. For product aliases, they can be sold under different brand names over time, and we want to keep track of that. Sometimes products can also be sold under different brand names at the same time, possibly even by different companies. So we try to keep track of as much of that as possible. We use identifiers like good ID as much as possible. We also use identifiers like pre-market submission numbers and establishment registration numbers, along with the product codes, brand names, and manufacturers that can be listed on the events. With all of this information together, we try to find the most appropriate product to match each of the events to. We've been designing and curating this database since 2016. Currently, we have 26,196 companies with an average of 108 added each month. These companies have a combined 105,059 Class 2 and 3 medical device products, with 272 additional added each month. To highlight a few of our event sources, we have over 166,000 approvals and clearances, going all the way back to 1970, 21,000 recalls with an average of 188 individual recalls added each month, and approximately 7 million adverse event reports. And this is only since 2011.
Wow, so that's a huge amount of medical data. What are some of the specifics that this data shows in regard to medical device recalls?
Since we created this database, we were able to dig a little deeper into the FDA recalls. So recalls of Class 2 products are the most common, although Class 2 products are also more numerous than Class 3 products in the industry in general. Currently, there are 6,668 open individual recalls, and the average length of time that a recall event is open is 502 days. Additionally, on the right, you can see the top 10 FDA root causes of individual recalls. Device design is the most common, followed by non-conforming material or component, process control, and software design. All of these top root causes are within the control of the manufacturer. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, we're going to do poll question number 2.
Okay, poll number 2. Is your organization doing any type of recall prediction or risk measurement now? And if yes, based on what? So if you'll select one, yes, internal data, yes, FDA data, yes, other data, or no. Okay, folks are responding. Thank you very much. So this will be an interesting poll. All right, we'll give it a second or two. All right, looks like we've got votes in. And let's share those responses. So 71% not doing any recall prediction right now, and 14% are with internal data. Interesting.
Yes, that's very interesting. Thanks, Angela. Okay, let's get into our hypothesis, how we tested it, and what we've found. Our original hypothesis was that data associated with predicate devices has predictive value for the associated 510K. For those that may not know, a 510K clearance is one of the types of pre-market submissions for medical devices and is required for Class 2 devices with moderate risk. In order to receive FDA clearance through the 510K process, the applicant must show that their device is substantially equivalent to another device that is currently on the market in the U.S. and has received previous clearance by the FDA. The previously cleared device is referred to as the predicate device. So we wanted to answer the question, if a predicate of a 510K has been recalled, is there a good chance that the 510K device will also be recalled?
Well, Rachel, it would appear there are some significant relationships between recalls of devices and the related predicate device, the ancestors, and also those successor devices, the descendants of that device. And I would expect this because the device family typically shares a common design and technology. How did you go about creating the evaluation study to test this hypothesis?
Yeah, Gary, exactly. So what we did first was we wanted to try to create these tree view of the 510K family. So for example, here's a tree view of the 510K family associated with clearance K142938. The direct predicates of K142938 are highlighted in orange. The predicates of those predicates are outlined in blue around the perimeter. And the successors or new devices that have listed K142938 as their predicate are shown with green outline towards the center. Overlaid are the number of recalls associated with each of the clearances, shown as numbers in red circles. As you can see, there are a few examples of a predicate and its associated parent clearance both being recalled and not being recalled. But do all these recalls in the family of K142938 put it at risk of being recalled? As we showed earlier, there's a lot of data available to analyze for predictive value. Along with the 510Ks, we can also look at products created from the other FDA approvals and clearances, what type of device the product actually is, the number of recalls it and its predicates or other similar products have had, also trends and adverse events of the product, its predicates, and similar products. Finally, the device's classification and how long it has been on the market. The model that we created is a classification model, so the output is either a yes, meaning it is at risk of recall, or no, meaning no risk of recall. We've developed a model mostly in R as a gradient-boosted decision tree. We've tested over 50 different features in many separate trials. On the right, you can see the basic workflow. We create a training data set made up of the features we want to test. We feed the training data into the machine learning algorithm, which then results in a trained model. We test the model using test data, which was not part of the training data set, and compare the model's prediction with what we know to have happened in real life.
Rachel, are there standard metrics to measure the success and effectiveness of a predictive algorithm? And if so, how well did the described recall algorithm predict actual recalls?
There's many different ways to measure the success of a model. We chose to use a confusion matrix, which shows the number of true positives, true negatives, false positives, and false negatives. Shown here is an illustrative example of 1,100 items. We also look at the specificity, which in our case describes the accuracy of predicting a recall, and sensitivity, which describes the accuracy of predicting no recall. As you may know, only a small percentage of the overall number of products are recalled each year, and thus our model is inherently unbalanced and favors no recall. Because of this, we prefer to report accuracy using the balanced accuracy, which tries to balance the results. Through many trials, we now have a model which takes product data as input and attempts to predict which products will be recalled in the next 365 days, or whatever time range we choose. We've implemented an oversampling technique to help balance the model and have found that using the previous 3 years of data is the most effective. With all of this, we were able to achieve a balanced accuracy of over 81%, and correctly identified 456 of the 535 medical device products that were recalled this past year.
Well, the true positive results are extremely valuable and impressive. What about the false positive count? Does that change as you include actual results for 2 or 3 years afterward instead of just 1 year?
So we found that it actually does. So through back testing the model with previous years and analyzing the results, we found that some recalls that the model predicts doesn't always happen in the current year, but in the next year or even the following year. For example, shown here is the confusion matrix for running the model for 2017. By the end of 2019, 751 of the 18,522 false positives from 2017 turned into true positives. This improved the ratio of true positives over false positives from 3% to 6.9%.
That's really interesting. Rachel, previously you discussed a number of indicators that you explored for use in building the algorithm. Which ones turned out to be the most significant in improving the accuracy of the algorithm?
As you stated, we tested many different features and data sets to see what would be the best for predicting the recall. We found that the age of the product, the type of pre-market submission, the product classification and associated device class and review panel, and finally, the recalls and adverse event reports over the past 3 years were the most significant. Okay, let's take a quick break and do another poll.
All right, let's launch our next poll. And if you let us know, how would your organization use this type of analysis that we've shown? Would you use it for risk management, quality management, supply chain, competitive intelligence, or some other use? Okay, votes are coming in. All right, and it looks like everyone has cast their votes. I'm going to close the poll. Let's look at the results. So risk management, 80%, quality management, 40%, and competitive intelligence, 30%. Also some for supply chain and other, so very interesting.
So that is an interesting spectrum. I'm sure a lot are interested in what might happen in the future. Well, let's see. Rachel, with your predictive crystal ball, can you take a look into the future and predict recalls for 2020?
Yes, Gary. We've already looked at how the model performed when looking at the past few years. Now let's take a look at this upcoming year. As I stated at the beginning, the model has found 15,848 products that are at risk of recall in 2020. When we look at these products broken down by type, cardiovascular, orthopedics, and radiology have the highest number of products at risk. Furthermore, the majority of the at-risk products are 510(k) products, and we can also aggregate this data at the company level. We've anonymized the names, but you can see the counts and percentage of the portfolio of Class 2 and 3 devices that are at risk for each. Please reach out to us if you'd like to find out if your company is one of these companies.
Well, it's certainly possible that some companies represented in the audience are on your 2020 predictive recall list. In any case, what values and benefits are there in knowing a product category or even a particular product is predicted to have a recall?
So we hypothesize or suggest that there's actually a wide impact for these results. So having this type of analysis at your fingertips could allow your risk management team to stay focused on the most at-risk products instead of spreading themselves thin and attempting to split their time trying to manage risk of the entire portfolio. We have the ability to run the model for a specific company, and we can also tweak the model to either increase detection rate or reduce false positives depending on the needs of your organization. Finally, medical device recalls are costly for the entire industry, with an estimated cost of between $2.5 and $5 billion per year. Recalls can also cause damage to a manufacturer's reputation and slow down their research and development, as money has to be moved to the management of the recall. For hospitals, reputation and patient safety are at risk when devices are recalled. Additionally, recalls can severely lower the value of an investment or business transaction. With the ability to predict recalls, everyone will have more information to power better decisions in terms of managing the perception of a recall, purchasing options, and investment due diligence. We envision a future that is proactive, not reactive.
Well, thank you, Rachel, for this very informative discussion and sharing the current status of this predictive analytical tool for medical device recalls. What are some of your next steps in refining the predictive algorithm?
So we're still working to refine the model. It's a continuous process, but our new hypothesis is that additional proprietary or internal data from a manufacturer could improve the model. We're interested in partnering with a few manufacturers to investigate this hypothesis. So for our final poll, we're kind of asking the audience if anybody would be interested in partnering with us to pursue this hypothesis. And if so, we will reach out to you after the webinar.
Okay, terrific. And it looks like we might have a question that came in. I'll read that out. In recent years, reports in MAUDE have included long narratives describing adverse events that did not occur, as well as legal disclaimers by the reporting facility and or manufacturer. How do you ensure that the adverse events that you mine from the MAUDE database are the adverse event and not a non-event disclaimer or declaration?
So we right now are looking at MAUDE as a whole. There's going to be a little bit of those types of adverse events for all products. So if it's widespread across the industry, it won't affect the model too significantly. MAUDE is only one of the sources that we're using. It's not, the number one thing that's leading into the recall prediction. And even if an adverse event hasn't actually occurred, what's being reported either as a patient frustration or an issue with use by the facility could still be an indicator of an upcoming recall.
Okay. Let's see. We have another question here. Would it improve your predictive analytics if UDI were added consistently and routinely to recall and adverse event data?
I think that would greatly impact the recall model in a positive way. It can be very difficult to match adverse events successfully to products, but if there was a UDI, that would greatly increase the rate at which we can confidently match the adverse event to products. We do see the good ID being listed on recalls, I think, more often now than on the adverse event reports, but unfortunately, there's not a clear way that they're being reported on the recall, so it could be listed as just a giant list of UDI numbers. Sometimes they're comma delimited, sometimes they're not. So it's hard for us to pick out UDIs even on recalls at this time.
Okay. All right. Well, are there any other questions? We have a minute or two here. Okay, we've got another question here. There are 9 English language adverse event recall licensing database systems worldwide. Are you limiting your system to US FDA, or do you include these other 8 systems?
We would love to include the other international data and regulatory institutions in this data set. The FDA, while it has its faults, the data is very public and they don't have many limitations on how you use it. So it's easy for us to get our hands on it and manipulate it. We have been trying to reach out and create some sort of agreement with both Australia, the TGA, and also Health Canada, since they do have user interfaces already where you can view some of this adverse event data, but they have stricter rules about mining the data. So we'd like to, we're working on putting an agreement in place to get our hands on some of that international data. And then all the work that they're doing in Europe with UNIMED and EUMDR, we're hoping that that adverse event data will become more public and accessible once all of that gets implemented also. And if, at that time that we have access to that data, we'll incorporate that into the algorithm and, our database.
All right. Okay. We have a couple other really good questions here. If you're not a manufacturer, but a user of medical devices, how can this data be used to prevent or select the best product for use? So if you're not a manufacturer, but you're some other type of user, how would you use this?
Yeah, so I see if I can go back a slide. So I've highlighted that a little bit on this slide as hospitals and investors, or if you're an outside clinician, it's good to know that there's been something going on with the devices before you purchase it. It could help with your purchasing decision if you're looking at multiple different choices. One has had a history of adverse events or, a recall last year, whereas the other one isn't or hasn't had that trend, so it could help inform a purchasing decision. Investors could use it kind of the same way if they're, having a choice between which companies they want to invest in, and one company has had a history of recalls or adverse events or has a couple of products in their portfolio that are at risk for being recalled in the coming year, then that might inform their choice on where they want to put their money. I think, there could be, even more implementations in other industries, legal, for, different lawsuits and things like that also.
Okay, thanks. Here's a good question about the age of the possibility recall. Are older or newer products more at risk for recall?
So, we can definitely dig more into the details for that. We're not going to give out, specifics about the model. Obviously, we take the age of the product into consideration, though. A product that's been on the market since the 70s or 80s, is inherently, most likely going to have less of a risk of recall. It might also not be on the market or not as readily available. So that all goes into the model when we create it. Newer products also inherently have less data available to us if they haven't been on the market as long. They don't have a history or trend in adverse events yet. So the model takes all of that into consideration.
All right. Here's a question about the World Health Organization and the NIH. They've identified medical device safety, adverse events, and recalls as a social determinant of health. Are you working with any of the companies, agencies, or governments working in these areas for health policy and healthcare funding?
So we don't get into policy too much right now. We would be more than happy to talk to people at NIH. We do work closely with the GMDN organization, who works closely with MRH in the UK. But I would be happy to talk about policy issues, but it's not something that we really work too much in that space right now.
Okay. All right. It looks like we've come to the end of our submitted questions. Please, we invite you to get in touch if you've got questions. Our contact info for this particular area is Erin McDermott. Her email is there on the screen, emcdermott@readtech.com, and her phone number. And you'll find more information about our proprietary database product, Navigator, on our website at www.readtech.com/navigator. And again, if you have some questions that you've submitted in the last couple of minutes, we will get back to you individually. and look for a follow-up email with a link to the recording and the slides. Thank you very much, everybody, for your participation today. We really appreciate it. Have a great day.